You're streaming with the Fantasy Follow. Week 3 is in the books, and we are here with the TFF Live Monday Postgame show, giving you a full breakdown and recap of all the weekend's games, and it starts right now.